Some fighters are remembered for the belts they won. Some are remembered for the wars they survived. Andrew Golota is remembered for something far uglier: the punches no man is supposed to throw. This is the story of a 6'4" heavyweight giant who had almost everything a fighter could ask for, yet kept choosing the dirtiest road available. A man built like a champion, but remembered like a warning. And in the end, the same man who once bullied opponents with size, pressure, and cheap shots would stand across from Mike Tyson, take one clean shot to the face, and discover that fear can hit harder than pride. This is the perfect example of a dirty fighter finally running into someone even more dangerous. In boxing, the most unforgivable thing is not losing. It is not fighting violently. It is not even leaving an opponent bruised, swollen, and bloodied. What truly crosses the line is when a man wears the gloves of a professional boxer, yet carries none of the honor, discipline, or respect that the sport demands. Andrew Golota was exactly that kind of man. He stood 6'4" and weighed close to 240 pounds. Physically, he had almost everything a heavyweight could ask for. Height, reach, size, strength, durability, forward pressure, he had all of it. With a body like that, he should have been built for a serious run in the heavyweight division. He could have made his name with clean power. He could have earned respect by fighting fire with fire. He could have forced the world to remember him as one of the most dangerous heavyweights of his generation. But Golota never chose the clean road. When most fighters put on gloves, they fight to win. When Golota put on gloves, it often looked as if he was stepping into the ring to unload the darkness inside him. Boxing, at its core, is a game for brave men. You can be violent, you can be ruthless, you can push an opponent to the edge, but there is still a line you do not cross. The ring is not a street corner, and the gloves are not a cover for dirty work. When two men fight under the lights, they are not just testing fists. They are testing discipline, pride, and the last piece of dignity a fighter is supposed to carry. Golota never seemed to believe in that. What made him so difficult to tolerate was not simply that he hit hard, or that his style was rough. It was that he knew exactly where he was not supposed to hit, and he kept going there anyway. Even worse, after crossing that line, he showed no real remorse, no shame, no proper explanation. He could still face the camera and deflect blame, as if what he had done was not disgraceful, but clever. That was not a momentary loss of control. That was something rotten in the bone. And then one day, the man who kept trampling on the rules finally ran into his harshest reckoning, Mike Tyson. By then, everyone understood that this fight was no longer just about winning or losing. It felt like an old debt that had been waiting to be collected. A dirty fighter who had twisted the sport with cheap shots was about to meet a man who knew darkness better than almost anyone in boxing. On paper, it was a fight. In reality, it felt like the perfect boxing script, a rule breaker walking straight into a destroyer. Today, we look at how Andrew Golota, one of the strangest and dirtiest figures of his era, pushed himself step by step toward disaster, and how, in front of a true destroyer, one punch ripped open the mask and exposed what was really underneath. Before the story truly begins, if you enjoy combat stories with blood, detail, attitude, and a real point of view, make sure to subscribe to Fight Epoch. Here, we do not do empty recaps, and we do not blindly worship fighters. We take you behind the ring to understand the men, the grudges, the rules, and the price that comes with violence. The heavyweight division of the 1990s was a battlefield full of giants. Back then, there was not the same level of polished packaging, image building, or manufactured drama that we see today. Heavyweight boxing was heavyweight boxing. The men who stepped into that ring were human wrecking machines. Evander Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe, and Mike Tyson. Those names alone carried pressure. In that era, if you wanted attention, you needed real fists. If you wanted to survive, you had to take punishment. If you wanted the world to remember you, you had to carve out your place one round at a time. And Golota was one of the strangest forces from that era. Born in Warsaw, Poland, he carried that hard Eastern European edge. When he first arrived in the American boxing scene, his physical presence alone was intimidating. He was tall, heavy, broad through the shoulders, and built like a moving wall. Standing across from him, an opponent did not just see a boxer. He saw something large, cold, and difficult to move. His fighting style was not complicated. He did not dance. He did not float. He did not rely on light footwork to steal rounds. He came forward. That was the whole point. He moved like a heavy truck with no brakes, shifting into drive and trying to roll through whatever stood in front of him. His jab was heavy, like an iron post being driven forward. His right hand carried a dull, crushing weight, like raw metal slamming into a door. When he opened up with combinations, he looked like a grinder, capable of crushing an opponent's guard, rhythm, and courage all at once. Before he met the truly elite, Golota had every reason to scare people. He was not one of those fighters who only looked dangerous until the bell rang. He had the body. He had the hands. He could genuinely beat a man's face bloody, but that was exactly where the problem began. God had given him an elite heavyweight body, but not the mind of a true champion. The most dangerous flaw in a boxer is not poor technique. It is not slow feet. It is not weak conditioning. It is when a fighter clearly has the ability to win clean, but still chooses the dirty road. Whenever a fight became difficult, whenever an opponent refused to fall the way Golota expected, the street thug side of him began to show. Rules, discipline, sportsmanship, all of it disappeared. If he could hurt the other man, he would. If he could break the other man's rhythm, he would. If he could escape pressure through something ugly, he was willing to do it. That side of Golota was exposed fully in his 2 fights with Riddick Bowe. And who was Riddick Bowe? He was one of the true heavyweight giants of the 1990s. Bowe had stood at the top of the division and fought legendary wars with Evander Holyfield. A fighter at that level does not get there by accident. Skill, size, power, inside fighting, toughness. Bowe had it all. In that era, if you wanted to take his name, you had to be ready to pay for it with blood. And in their first fight, Golota shocked almost everyone. From the opening bell, he was not intimidated by Bowe's reputation. He did not fight cautiously. He did not come in just to survive. Instead, he came forward like a bear released from a cage, pressing Bowe with heavy jabs and combinations, forcing the former champion backward and refusing to let him settle. In the first round, Bowe held himself together. By the second round, things began to shift. After the third round, everyone could feel it. Bowe was being backed toward the ropes. Golota was breaking up his rhythm one punch at a time. Blood began to appear. Bowe's body looked heavier. His counters became slower. A man who had once stood over the heavyweight division was suddenly looking uncomfortable under Golota's pressure. The crowd saw it. The commentary team saw it. Golota was not there as a stepping stone. He had a real chance to drag Riddick Bowe down from the heights of heavyweight boxing. At that moment, Golota was only a few steps away from the biggest victory of his career. All he had to do was keep the pace, keep punching upstairs, keep breaking Bowe down. If he stayed disciplined, he could have beaten a former heavyweight king and forced his way toward the top of the division. But right then, the demon in Golota's head reached out. He ignored the openings to the head. He turned away from the clean path to victory. And suddenly, his punches went to the one place no fighter is supposed to target, below the belt. A heavyweight punch to the body is already enough to steal the air from a man's lungs. But when that kind of power is driven into the most vulnerable part of the body, it becomes something else entirely.
He's done too little of that in this round. Golota starting to fall in love with his ability to hit. He's just hammering Bowe in close. Just hammering it. That was another low blow. Down goes Bowe, and that's it.
Riddick Bowe collapsed in pain and the entire arena exploded. Inside the ring, both camps rushed in. Men shoved each other. Men swung at each other. Someone even grabbed a walkie-talkie and smashed it toward Golota's head. In the stands, the crowd lost control. Shouting, screaming, objects flying. The whole place turned into chaos. A night that was supposed to belong to boxing had become an ugly scene of disorder. That was the absurd tragedy of Golota. He was close to winning, yet he chose the lowest possible way to ruin what should have been his moment. He did not leave the ring like a winner. He was escorted out under security, surrounded by anger, insults, and disgrace. A normal man would have learned from that. A normal fighter would have gone home, opened the rulebook, looked himself in the mirror, and understood that some lines cannot be crossed again. But Golota was not that kind of man. 5 months later, the rematch arrived. The world wanted to see Riddick Bowe get revenge, and Golota had been handed a chance to prove that the first fight had been a one-time collapse in judgment. Instead, the story repeated itself. Once again, Golota used his physical strength and heavy pressure to make Bowe uncomfortable. His punches were still heavy. His forward pressure was still brutal. He quickly found himself in control of large stretches of the fight. But when the pressure rose, he lost control again. Again, low blows. Again, fouls. Again, he dragged a fight that should have been completed cleanly into the mud. The referee finally had enough and disqualified him. 2 major fights, 2 golden opportunities, and he played a strong hand terribly both times. By then, boxing fans understood exactly what Golota was. He was not just a heavy-handed fighter who occasionally lost control. He was a man with elite physical tools and no moral bottom line inside the ring. He thought he could keep surviving in the heavyweight division as long as his body was big enough, his fists were heavy enough, and his skin was thick enough. But some debts do not disappear. They simply wait. And at that time, one of the most dangerous names in boxing was still Mike Tyson. By the year 2000, Tyson was no longer the same 20-year-old destroyer who had once torn through the heavyweight division like a storm. Time had eaten away at his prime. He had been to prison. He had lost fights. His life was surrounded by controversy, darkness, and the kind of complicated emotion that boxing fans still argue about. Some missed him, some hated him, some said he was finished, some said his era was already dead. But one thing had never changed. When Mike Tyson stepped into a ring, the pressure was still there. He did not need to talk. He did not need to shadow box. He did not even need to glare dramatically. All he had to do was stand there in silence and look at the man across from him, and the air in the arena would suddenly feel heavier. Because everyone knew that when Tyson entered that state, he was not thinking about winning rounds. He was thinking about ending the man in front of him. Golota refused to believe it. In his mind, Tyson was no longer the myth from the old days. He saw a fallen former king, a controversial former champion whose best years were supposedly behind him. Golota was taller. He was heavier. He had the longer reach. If he could use his jab and clinch, he believed he could keep Tyson from getting inside. If he could frustrate Tyson, slow the rhythm, and drag the fight into ugly territory, he believed he had a path. However confident Golota was before the fight, that was how lost he looked once the fight began, because this time, he was not facing a man he could drag into the mud. He was facing a real predator that had already lived in darkness. On October 20th of the year 2000, the fight finally began. Golota stepped into the ring with that same huge frame, those heavy shoulders, and that cold expression. He looked like a moving wall. He tried to stare Tyson down. He tried to make everyone believe that he was the bigger beast that night. But when Tyson walked out, the atmosphere changed. There were no unnecessary movements, no exaggerated performance, no wasted gestures. That was one of the most terrifying things about Tyson. At his most dangerous, he did not need theatrics. He carried the old aura with him. The bell rang, and the first round began. Golota followed the plan. He used his height and reach to control distance, throwing long jabs to block Tyson's entry, then trying to use his size and weight to drag Tyson into clinches and slowly drain the beast's fire. But Tyson gave him no time to settle. From the opening moments, Tyson pressed forward hard. His familiar head movement made Golota's jabs miss over and over again. Tyson's peekaboo style, the style that had made him famous, was exactly the nightmare that so many tall heavyweights feared. You could see him right in front of you, but you still could not hit him. You reached out to control him, and he was already inside. You tried to step back, and his fist was already on your face. Tyson's punches were fast, accurate, and heavy. They slammed into Golota's face with brutal force. Late in the first round, Tyson stepped in and landed the kind of right hand that changes the temperature of a fight. It did not just score, it announced what the rest of the night was going to feel like. Golota hit the canvas. The Polish giant who had looked so confident before the fight was suddenly on the floor, trying to gather himself under the lights. He got back up and continued, but his eyes had changed. There was confusion in them now. There was fear. He had finally understood that he was not facing someone he could beat with fouls. Tyson was not there to play dirty with him. From beginning to end, Tyson had only one purpose: get close and knock him down.
A little bit. He's not really unloading with these big shots.
Nice over the left eye of Golota. Oh! Down goes Andrew Golota. What a right! Straight right on the button. Golota down.
Same right ended up in that cut, Steve.
A flash knockdown. He got up quickly. Here are the final seconds of round one.
The bell at the end of the first round saved Golota. He staggered back to his corner as his trainers tried to pull him back into the fight. But on camera, you could see that Tyson had already taken something out of him. His rhythm was gone. His confidence was cracked. When the second round began, Tyson kept coming. This time, Golota's movements were different. His jab was no longer as decisive. His feet were no longer as steady. His eyes stayed locked on Tyson, as if he were watching a monster that could pounce at any second. Every time Tyson moved forward, Golota instinctively backed up. Every time the distance closed, his body seemed to feel the pain before the punch even arrived. That is the fairest and cruelest truth of the ring. The fear you once used on others can one day come back at you in a much harsher form.
But how much more can he take? Tyson again.
Coming with the big power shots because Golota.
240 pounds into hard, but the overhand right
Just for the end zone. Right with that.
and he seems fearful to throw his right hand for fear of what might be coming back.
After the second round, the truly unbelievable moment arrived. Golota returned to his corner and told his trainers he did not want to continue. No matter how they pleaded with him, he did not want to spend one more second in that ring. He pushed past everyone, walked away, and quit the fight completely. A 6'4" heavyweight giant, a man who had repeatedly crossed the line against Bowe and treated the rules as if they meant nothing, chose the ugliest way out when he stood across from Tyson. That moment enraged the crowd. The fans had paid top money and only got 2 rounds. They threw cups, bottles, and debris toward Golota as he left, calling him a coward and a quitter. The anger was not only about the ticket price, it was also about disgust. Golota had lost even the most basic dignity a fighter is supposed to have. Tyson stood in the middle of the ring and watched Golota leave. No chase, no need for extra words, the damage had already been done. But what many people did not know at that moment was that Golota's decision to quit may have saved him from even worse damage. Reports after the fight said he had suffered a fractured left cheekbone, a concussion, and a herniated disc in his neck. The man who had so often hurt others through foul tactics had finally met someone more dangerous than himself. This time, survival mattered more than pride. Later, because of an issue with Tyson's post-fight drug test, the official result was changed to a no contest. But for everyone who watched that night, the real result had already been written. It was not about what appeared on the record. It was about the image that stayed in people's minds. Tyson pressing forward, Golota breaking under the pressure, Golota going down, and then Golota refusing to continue after the second round. That is what this fight truly left behind. One of boxing's most satisfying acts of violent reckoning. Boxing can be brutal. It can be bloody. It can leave faces swollen and bodies broken. But boxing cannot exist without a bottom line. You can be technically rough. You can be knocked down. You can lose. But you cannot treat dirty tactics as a skill. You cannot turn fouls into weapons. And you cannot use cheap shots to damage another man's career, then expect the sport to look the other way forever. Golota once believed the rules could not touch him. The crowd could not stop him. His opponents could not control him. But in the end, he discovered that there is something in the ring more direct than the rulebook. Mike Tyson's fists. In the face of absolute force, men who refuse to respect the rules eventually meet someone who does not waste words. One punch, and the truth comes out. That is Mike Tyson. He is not perfect. He is controversial. His story is complicated and full of darkness. But whenever he steps into the ring, he remains one of the few names capable of making the heavyweight division hold its breath. Not because he never lost, but because his fists told the world again and again that some men do not understand reason. So you make them understand with a punch. That is all for this episode of Fight Epic. We will see you in the next one.